brain is absolutely ridiculous and one of the least understood aspects of the natural kingdom. We don't even understand how the brain of a worm works, so how on earth are we meant to comprehend our own evolved grey matter? Psychology's only been officially studied for 130 years and we're still making huge discoveries year on year. My mum's a psychologist, so I grew up hearing about all this stuff and really took it for granted, some of the things that I learned that have proved to be really useful. So like any responsible millennial, I decided to start a podcast about it and share the sweet, sweet gift of therapy. I'm sat on the couch with my mum, Sandy. She's a psychologist with over 20 years experience studying and treating clients. Hi mum.
Hi Adam.
We're going to release a new episode each week talking about a different aspect of mental health and therapy, and hopefully some of you will find it really useful. All our episodes are going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel, On the Sofa Pod, and if you actually want to watch us sitting on the couches and in front of the fire, we'd nearly run out of logs actually, so we'll have to do a log trip in a minute. Go to YouTube and check us out there. Also follow us on Instagram at On The Sofa Pod. Give us a follow if you like us, and rate us 5 stars on iTunes because it really helps us reach new people. This week we're going to be talking about what is a therapist. Last week we discussed, what you can do before therapy to get the most out of it, but this week we're going to look at what is the most appropriate kind of therapist for you and what are the different types, because most of my friends don't know the difference between a counsellor and a psychologist at all.
No. Why would they?
Why would they?
Yeah, exactly. And it is important to know what you need, what you're going to require. So
you wouldn't see a surgeon for a headache?
Well, you might.
Well, yeah, so I'll shut up.
There are many different types of therapists, and we quite simply haven't got time to go through them all, and that doesn't mean that they're not important. So I do want to say that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just going to stick with counselling, psychiatrists, and chartered psychologists. So let's start with counselling. So essentially it's purposeful conversation where clients meet to explore personal problems and spend time processing solutions for the problems along the way. It's normally carried out face to face, but more and more counsellors are working on video link,
of course,
and telephone calls for some people. So there's essentially 5 counselling skills that you're trained in. Obviously listening,
for sure,
empathy, genuineness, authenticity, unconditional positive regard, and we spoke a little bit about this, about how non-judgmental, sort of like an attachment to a caregiver for a young child. The child needs to know that they can do or say something wrong and they're not going to be disregarded. So you need to get a feeling for that with your counsellor, and the counsellor needs to be concrete, and stable. And they will ask open questions, and they will use self-disclosure if necessary.
What is self-disclosure?
So sometimes a client might be talking about something they've experienced that's been quite traumatic, and you, the therapist, might have been through a very similar ordeal, and you have to be very careful and work out, would it be helpful for my client to know this? Would that enhance what's going on between us? Or would they feel, because sometimes they do, the client, would they feel, I'm not here to talk about you? There's a real fine balance there.
Taking the power away from the client. Yeah.
And that's easy to do, so you really have to figure it out. Would it help the relationship? So the primary goal for counsellors is to achieve overall wellness. So they're particularly good at reflection and listening skills. They should be accredited by a professional body such as BACP, and they require 2 years training, or it can go up to 4 years training, and requires much more client contact. So anyone can call themselves a counsellor. They don't even have to be on one of these courses. But if your counsellor says she's done 2 years and she's got 2 years, that means she's hopefully got 2 years clinical contact. But if she's been on the course of training for 4 years, then she's probably he or she will probably have more clinical hours, and you need to check this out really, because clinical hours is an important part of how far ahead are they in their...
Same as any skill, you can learn all the theory, and it's actually the experience where you learn the most.
Yeah.
Something you touched on but is really important that I didn't know until we chatted earlier is accredited by and member of are very different. So when Mum says accredited by the BACP, which is the British Association of Counselling Psychologists, is that right?
Counselling and psychotherapy.
There you go, counselling and psychotherapy is kind of like in the same way as if you book a cab through Uber, you're getting an insured driver who's been trained in a certain way at the minute, who has the right protection for COVID in place, and it's like a mark of quality almost, that you can trust that Uber are doing that. Maybe not with Uber, to be fair, but that they're doing their job to make sure that everyone is of a certain standard. And exactly the same with the BACP. If you're accredited by the BACP, it means that you are fulfilling those.
Well, you've done so many clinical hours.
Yeah, and you meet the criteria that you need to be calling yourself a counsellor.
Yeah.
Whereas anybody can apply to be a member.
Well, not anybody really.
Okay.
But yeah, it's easy. It's easy to become a member. So check out, does it say accredited or member of? Because you could potentially do it. If you were registered.
Trust me, you don't want to be counselled by me. So
I don't know about that, Adam. You're quite good.
I'm very. So I charge £100 an hour if you want to come and see me. Just book it in on the website.
Yeah, watch that phone go off. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what is counselling really good at? What is?
I think again, it's a difficult question, because some counsellors I know, they've been in the field for 20 years.
Right.
So they're trained in lots of different, like bereavement, self-esteem, coaching. They might have lots of things under their belt.
I've been on far more courses than a psychologist with a lot less experience.
Maybe, yeah.
Right.
So it is important to find that out. But find out what their speciality is. Because most people have got a speciality in the therapy field.
So counsellors tend to be, talking generalities again, tend to be great for things that are current affairs, bereavement, stress at work, like anxiety with social groups, little things that, not little things,
but
things that are currently bothering you.
Your everyday life.
Sorry, I'm drew a complete brain fart there.
That's okay.
Everyday life stuff that you can talk through with somebody.
Yeah. And again, that's not conclusive. There are counsellors that I'm sure work in that are trained in other fields like psychodynamic therapy. So you've just got to check it all out.
For sure. Okay.
Then we've got psychiatrists. So they're licensed in their area to practice and they're on the Healthcare Professional Council. So HCPC, they have to be on that register to practice. And you can find all that out on the internet. So their work involves largely, it's a medicine focus.
Medicinal focus.
Yeah. On the diagnosis, the treatment and the prevention of mental health. They look at emotional and behavioural disorders, and they often treat people with conditions that may require medication. They can prescribe electroconvulsive therapy. I said it.
You got it right.
That word. Applying electrical currents to the brain.
Right. Which is a disputed practice, let's say.
Not by them, but yes.
Certain people don't think
us.
it's the most productive.
I don't agree with it. I know what it's supposed to do, but it's very antiquated and it can and does cause short-term memory problems. So I wouldn't recommend it. And also light therapy to treat seasonal depression, SAD. They carry out a formulation during an assessment, and then they develop a treatment plan for each client. and this is a very interesting part here about their training. So psychiatrist training is normally 5-year degree in medicine, a 2-year foundation program, and then 3 years of core training in psychiatry.
Jeez.
To the brain. And then 3 years training in a speciality.
So going on 13 years of training.
So it's a lot of training. But remember, these figures are constantly changing because they're trying to reduce courses. There aren't enough psychiatrists in the country. There aren't enough psychologists in the country. So they're trying to, where they can, take some shortcuts.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that they're any less qualified, by the way. You know, that we're getting, as I said in the first intro episode, it's bleeding edge science, psychology and psychiatry, and we're learning so much all the time that actually some of the stuff they used to teach might not be relevant anymore, or you know,
outdated
for sure.
So there's a lot of training there. Very, very expensive, that they normally access through the NHS.
Okay.
A lot of their core training. And then we move on to chartered psychologists, of which we have lots of different chartered psychologists.
Just before we move on, what would a psychiatrist tend to be really good at? What is their area?
So, lots, but schizophrenia springs to mind because they can prescribe a medication that would perhaps manage that a little bit better.
Yeah.
So something really, you know, that person might not be able to engage in talking therapy because of their illness.
Right, so maybe the psychiatrist can prescribe them things that would manage those symptoms that then might open them up to other treatments.
Yeah, possibly.
Right.
There's loads and loads of examples, but that's just
the first one that came
example,
to mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Came to mind. And then moving on, chartered psychologists. I'm only going to discuss 2. That's clinical psychologists. They work again within the medical remit, so they have no problem with medications for depression, etc. Counselling psychologists, slightly different, because we don't really believe in the medical model for the issues that we deal with. Okay.
Not that you don't believe it works, but you believe there's other options that would benefit the client long term, potentially.
Yeah, with hopefully less side effects.
Okay.
Chartered psychologists are licensed in the same way HCPC, like the psychiatrists. They have to be on that register to get their title. Similarly, they work with people with enduring mental health conditions using talking therapy, but we also use a lot of interview tools and techniques and tests. We use a lot of observational work, like micro body language. So, for example, I love it in the summer when people are wearing sandals and flip-flops, because sometimes they scrunch their toes up on a particular question. So that tells me something, and I'll say, I just noticed you scrunched your toes up then. Why would that be? So it's quite the body language is really quite useful, very useful. So training in a minimum of 3 different types of therapeutic orientations. So CBT, psychodynamic theory, and person-centered therapy.
Which we're going to get into next. No, we're going to get into
in
that
a couple of weeks.
In a couple of weeks, yeah. The different kinds of therapy that you can have.
Yeah.
Methodology, sorry.
Yeah, orientations. So more experienced therapists like counsellors, etc., they probably have trained, like I've trained in many, many different orientations, but that's because I've been doing it for a long time, and I don't like to put one person in one box. I like to think, no, we need to switch to a different type of therapy here.
Yeah, just briefly while we're on the methodology thing, we're going to keep reiterating this. CBT is a huge trigger word, and people are like, I'm seeing a therapist, they said we should use CBT. They'd do, I'm doing CBT. The NHS has said we should do CBT. And really bear in mind, CBT is used a lot because it works, definitely, but it isn't the it isn't always the best fit for somebody. Didn't fit me at all. I really didn't get on with CBT, and my therapist recommended I tried something slightly different called ACT. But CBT is one way of dealing with a bunch of problems, and maybe that isn't the best way for you. So be careful that just because you're hearing this trigger word CBT doesn't really mean anything. It's like saying, oh, I'm going to give you paracetamol, and another person might give you ibuprofen, but you might have an ibuprofen allergy, so actually you need codeine. I don't know. There's different ways of doing this,
but we'll help to iron those out. Yeah,
we are going to get into this later, but at this early stage, just because you've seen CBT, don't think, oh, they're great, they must be great if they do that, because it's not quite right. That isn't quite how it works. It
might not be right for you.
Yeah,
but we will go into that later on. So in the same way as psychiatrists, we have to formulate, and after the assessment, and we have to make out a treatment plan. That's part of our training. Training involves as little as 8 years, that's fast track, or as long as 12 years, gaining an undergraduate degree accredited by the BPS.
Yeah.
And then 4 years of a doctorate degree, and at least 1 year of focused relevant clinical work experience.
So work experience is really important on these.
Yeah, all along you will be on work experience.
Okay.
Placements.
So psychiatry and psychology have similar training schedules in terms of the timescale. Whereas counselling is a lot quicker, but then it works. It's not trying to do the same thing. They're very different things.
They are very, very different.
Okay.
So is that where we're at?
Yeah, well, I guess to finish the psychology section, what is psychology really good at? What is its speciality? Psychologist, sorry, yeah.
I think the list is endless. Because obviously over the years you learn how to coach. So you can do business coaching, you can do performance coaching.
Because it all, as you'll see in the podcast, all of these things tie in really closely. Or
it can be the anxiety, the depression. It can a biggie as well that I work with are attachment disorders, and in modern society, and particularly in the NHS, they would call what I call attachment disorders. They call BPD, borderline personality disorder. And again, there's different sort of strengths of this. You know, not everyone fits into the same. No, there's different levels, isn't there? Like autism, there's different levels. People are on different parts of the scale. But so virtually, not anything, but a lot. We deal with a lot if you're trained to that level.
Yeah.
So acquired brain injury,
trauma.
But
make sure you speak to your therapist about what they're specialised in. So you specialise anxiety, depression and trauma work and addiction.
Acquired brain injury expert. Addiction. Yeah, there's quite, because it's
You've
2 decades.
For a while, yeah. But
so
do check and ask, because the first therapist I saw was a specialist in addiction, and I wasn't addicted to anything, and she was useful for me, but that probably wasn't a very good fit.
No.
Because I was coming to her with issues that she wasn't up to date on. It wasn't her thing.
But because it was your first time, you didn't know, and I said to you the other week, I should have really interviewed her.
Yeah.
But it's really awkward for a mum to do that.
Yeah, of course
in this profession, because you feel like you're
stepping on toes a bit.
Maybe you would upset them, but now, looking back, I wouldn't have allowed that.
But hopefully after listening to this episode, you can make that decision for yourself and make an informed decision on what's right for you.
Yeah.
Or at least have some, maybe you don't know the answer, but at least you should be able to know if someone says, oh, I'm seeing a counsellor, and actually they are, I don't know, they have really deep-rooted issues from childhood. You'd be like, oh, maybe you should consider seeing a psychologist instead.
What are their specialities?
Okay, fair, true. Okay. Anyway, I hope that was useful for everybody. If you've got any questions, as always, let us know on Instagram at onthesophapod. I get it wrong every time. @On the Sofa Pod. Send us a message and I'll put it to Mum. And also you can email or contact
Healthy Mind Stafford.
Healthy Mind Stafford, which is
page.
Mum's company. So just give it a Google, Healthy Mind Stafford, and you can shoot any questions there. Next week we're going to look at therapy shopping, which is a fun activity for the whole family, where you basically we're going to look at what things you should look for in your therapist, who you're going to be seeing, and how to decide if someone's a good fit for you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Hope you enjoyed this, and if you watch on YouTube, make sure you click subscribe, give us a follow on Instagram, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.